I want to welcome everyone to Hiring, Managing, and Developing Talent in a Small Business. We are very pleased to have two SCORE Boston mentors with us today to go through this material with you. As we get started though, in case you're new to SCORE, I want to tell you a little bit about our organization. And our main focus as a SCORE organization is to share information with the small business community. And we do that in a couple different ways. One is through our website. If you haven't been to the score.org website, I strongly encourage you to take a look. You're going to find templates, you're going to find blogs, you're going to find recorded webinars, you're going to find articles that you can read, lots of great information. So strongly encourage you to take a look through that. The other way we share information is through our workshops and webinars. Most are online. We do occasionally have a few in person. And each chapter gives different presentations, and we share as a district with about 8 different chapters to bring you a wide variety of topics from the business community. The other way we share information is through our mentorship program. And honestly, I think this is the most important part of SCORE. Our mentors are volunteers. They have a wide variety of experience and knowledge that they want to share with you. And we are working with folks at all stages of the game. We're working with those that are trying to decide if small business ownership is right for them. We're working with those that are in that planning phase, and we're working with those that are already in business. And some of those are getting ready to grow and they need help to get to that next level. So we mentor folks on many different topics. If you've never been to a SCORE mentoring session, a first session is probably going to last about 40 minutes. And they want to know about you. They want to know what your goals are. They want to know what your challenges are. And they're going to work with you to come up with a plan. And the other wonderful thing about working with a SCORE mentor is you're not just working with one person. You're working with the whole chapter. They work as a team. They seek advice from each other. They bring in co-mentors as the client's needs change. It's a really wonderful collaboration. So if you don't have a SCORE mentor, we strongly encourage you to consider that. It's very easy to get one. You just go to the score.org website. There'll be a blue box. You can put your zip code in and it'll match you to the nearest chapter. And then we're going to ask you a couple quick questions so that we can help match you to the mentor that can best assist you. So strongly encourage you, if you do not have one, to seek one out. We are recording today, and the recording will be posted on the score.org/Boston website. And I'll put that information in chat here shortly, where to find it. And it'll be posted in approximately 24 to 48 hours. So you can watch for that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our presenters. We have Steve and Carolyn, and welcome to both of you. And thank you for presenting on this subject. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm Steve Bookbinder, and this is Carrie Morrill. We both worked pretty extensively over the years on people issues. So today we're going to be talking about hiring, managing, and developing talent in a small business. If you could go to the first slide, Carrie. Why do we use this term, talent management, as opposed to just saying workers? Because we really do want you to think, and most companies now are thinking about, how do they deal with the people who work with them? How do they think of people as talent as opposed to just a resource? That's the best way to get, one of the reasons is that's the best way to get more productivity, to get the kind of loyalty or the kind of involvement or engagement that you want from employees. So we're going to talk about how do you plan for talent, especially because these are uncertain times. They're uncertain economically, they're somewhat uncertain politically. We're going to talk about hiring, including the major legal issues you face, the onboarding you face, and the issues that are involved in hiring today, when there is a time in which there is inflation, there's wages that are rising. There's, in some cases, a scarcity of talent for who you want. What do you do about that? We're going to talk about the total rewards of an organization. In other words, it isn't just the pay and it isn't just the benefits. It's what it's like to work there. It's what are the other things that you do to make people feel that they have a good deal. In other words, they have a good deal. They're getting something that they want, and you're getting something that you need and want as well. We're going to talk about the issues of performance. We're going to talk about you, because you're part of the talent of a company. You, the leader of the company. What do you have to do to be more effective? What's the value that you can add to employees and that they can add to you? How much difference do they really make? In addition, we're going to talk about your concerns and what questions you have and what you're thinking about. If not today, maybe not, you don't have a hiring situation today, but you may in the near future. What's happening with you? So we'd like to get to know you a little bit. And, one of the things I'd ask right now is, what are your objectives for today? What are some of the issues that you're facing? And, we don't have a prize to give to the first person who talks, but we'd like to hear a few things just off the top of your head. What are some of the reasons that you're here today? What are some of the questions that you're curious about or issues you're facing? So who wants to start?
Yeah, just put that in chat and I will read those out. Finding dependable employees.
Okay, dependable. Sharon, what do you mean by dependable? You could unmute yourself.
Oh, no, she can't. I didn't know we were going to do that today.
Okay.
We have employment retention is from Eloise.
Okay.
Managing performance.
Yep.
Where to start and how to make sure I'm not missing any legal requirements. Compensation packages is another one. Understanding what to look for when looking for virtual assistants, legalities. Sharon's adding on to her comment, even after you went through multiple interviews, you still don't know who you're getting sometimes.
Is okay. Again, Teresa, you can't enable them to unmute themselves.
Okay, if they give permission in chat, I can try and do that, yes. Sharon,
Okay.
did you want to, Sharon, are you interested in being unmuted to speak?
Okay.
Sure, okay, give me a second. Okay, Sharon, you can hit unmute and you can speak.
Okay, thank you. For example, we will hire someone, we'll take them.
What's your company, first of all, Sharon?
Oh, I'm sorry. Again, it's CMJ Paving and Landscaping.
Okay.
And of course, we do landscaping and we also do paving, driveways, parking lots, repairs. We do a multitude of things, but truck drivers for hauling loads. But we'll hire someone, we'll train them, we'll invest, even like if they're not OSHA certified, we'll get them OSHA certified, and they may even stay for a week, 2 weeks. I've had someone even stay a month, and then all of a sudden it's like they're always looking for the next opportunity. Even if you tell them, in 30 days, we're going to review you again. I've never seen it so hard this year to be able to keep loyal employees.
Yeah. Carrie?
I was going to say that I think Sharon is facing a problem that crosses all industry sectors, and it's become more of an issue since COVID, since people have gone back to work. I think one of the things Do you do, when you're hiring people, do you do any references?
Yes, yes, they have good references, very good references.
And do you talk about things such as what's the best way to manage this person? What do you think motivates them? I think what really needs to be done now is ongoing conversations with new hires at the very beginning. How are they doing? Are they finding this to be what they expected? And do you know why they're leaving? Do you do exit interviews?
Now that's something I have not, one, again, some of them have even like spent time being mentored by the president, and it's just like, as soon as, I mean, they'll let me know and they're apologetic, they say they really like the company. I do think that you're correct. No, I know you're correct, because me, myself, I lost my job after 20 years in COVID and never imagined facing that, but it turned out to be one of the best things that can happen to me. But I do like when you said ongoing conversations.
Yes.
Initially, more of that, even though maybe I've been doing it, but just hearing that, perhaps that's something we need to invest more time in that.
Yeah, we can't, Sharon, first of all, thank you very much for sharing. And being the first person, this whole question of what is retention, what are employees looking for today? What are some of those things? You can't necessarily keep every employee, that's for sure. And you can't think that every employee is going to be like the one who just left. So you've actually got to keep an open mind on things. Anyone else who wants to share that maybe something that you want to hear about today or learn about today? And we're going to try to respond to you, Sharon, during the course of things. Anybody else who has comments about what's going on?
Yes, Steve, we received quite a few in chat, so it's hard to. Yeah, so I don't know if you want to comment on any of these in particular, but quite a few people submitted into chat talking about employee retention, asking about managing performance. We have people asking about where to start and how to make sure you're missing any legal requirements. We have people asking about compensation packages, understanding what to look for when looking for virtual assistants, creating strong job postings and creating onboarding systems, how to hire. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So I don't know if maybe we can kind of get through some of the topics and then maybe
that's right,
and address some of these questions if we don't reach any of them, or.
Well, we're going to touch on many of them. So, let's go to the next slide. Carrie, if we could.
Yep, we just did.
Yep. One of the things that we talk about, as a starting point is if you're thinking about hiring, if you're thinking about having a virtual assistant, is what's your business? What are your marketing strategies? And what kind of talent do you need? If you need a virtual assistant, what do you need in that virtual assistant? Then the second thing is, what's the right number of people you need to execute your strategies? Whether you're a paving company or you're running any other kind of industry. And what are the competencies you need from the person that you're hiring? Number 4, if you're going to invest in somebody, what's the financial investment? The number of people that you can afford and what you're going to pay them. That's the compensation package, in which you have to sort of think about what's the competitive rate of pay and the timing of when you want the talent to be in place. And then once you think through these steps, the 6th thing, and you've hired the person, you've got to think about, okay, how am I going to motivate this person? What is the onboarding program? What is the training program that was mentioned? What are the pay programs? What are the workforce policies like flex time that may encourage people to stay with you? So this is a simple way to think about how you approach hiring. Many people don't follow this path. What they do is they sort of hire someone based on a current need. And sometimes it's not clear that you've actually hired for exactly what you need, that you've thought through the competencies, that you've thought through, okay, can I afford this person? What's the return? One of the things that's interesting in that process is that people forget that when you hire a person on day one, he or she doesn't necessarily give you the return on your investment right away. It takes time. So I guess I'd ask for some responses in the chat now in terms of a talent plan. How many people, do you have a talent plan? Is this helpful to you as you think about it? Anybody? Let's see in the chat. Is this helpful? So Alan says yes. Cheryl says yes. Alan says yes, somewhat helpful. No talent plan. So this is helpful. When I wonder if, you know, again, this is sort of an issue to sort of think about as a discipline, okay? And whether it's going to be helpful to you as you go forward. One thing for sure, hiring at the last minute is a recipe for a problem. You really need to think through how you're going to hire people and whatever. Okay, so let's go to the next slide.
I'm going to comment on
Yeah,
the talent plan. One of the things that you should do when you're thinking about the talent you need is look at the talent you have in-house. And is there anybody in-house who you could promote or move into another position and then hire at a more junior level to replace that person? Because that's a retention strategy. When people feel that they have forward motion in their career in a company, they're much more inclined to be engaged and want to stay.
okay. So when we talk about hiring and we talk about a job description, first off, that's part of what establishes, you know, you've got to think about what are the soft skills I want an employee to have. That is to say, do you need people to be creative? Do you need them to be collaborative? If you're running a restaurant or you're running a camp or you're doing any kind of things, what are the hard skills? What are the particular things you have to be able to do if you're in paving or landscaping? In this market, you know, which is, as we've sort of cited, a tough market in which there's a question of the kind of talent around, you've got to be able to sell and evaluate potential hire. So as Carrie mentioned before, you've got to ask yourself, what motivates these employees? How can I empower them? How can I trust them? And once you've done a good job at hiring, perhaps, you've got to think then about the issues of managing performance.
Before we go on to performance, I'd like to go back to the job description. The job description is a legal document, so putting it together is important that you define the role as it is, not having a lot of other tasks as required, because you need to really think through, what is this person going to do? What are the other tasks they might be asked to do? And you need to be very specific, because if the job description doesn't match the job, there's the potential, if you have a disgruntled employee, that there's a potential lawsuit there. So think of the job description is important. And my advice always is, when you send a job offer to an employee, send the job description to, have them sign the job description and date it, so you know that they've actually read it, because that protects you as a company.
I guess I'd like to see in the chat how many people have job descriptions and are they any good? If being honest about that. What do people think about job descriptions? Are they helpful? Do they do anything? Do you have those? Okay. So we hear from Diane. Diane, what kind of business do you have? You could write that in the chat. Reviewed and signed by 30 days. Again, we're hearing from David Smith. Diane, you have a small consulting firm. Cheryl, you've also written them before. David talks about they being fully available upon hire. They're reviewed and signed 30 days and 60 and 90, actually. Cheryl has written them. LJ Soares has written them. Very basic descriptions and more responsibilities added. Agree, very important, working with an HR professional to get these in place.
They should be written to some extent by the hiring manager as well. HR can review them. And you should review them every year to 2 years to make sure that they're still accurate. They should be written for the position, not the person.
Yeah, as Ellen says, she asked the question, should you update the description that they initially signed? Yes, if the job changes, for sure.
And have them read it and sign it.
David Smith says that there's several stay interviews that he has. What do they like already? What's more of what they're looking to do? That's actually a very good practice to think about in the very beginning.
Stay interviews should be throughout the tenure of the employee. They shouldn't just be at the beginning, and you can integrate them into the performance management process, which we will discuss. Performance management is really a strong retention tool. It's real time and it focuses on the employee's continuous development. So one-on-one meetings with their managers on a frequent basis, either weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, and part of that should be devoted to stay interview types of questions.
Now, when people ask about managing performance, 3 things should always come to mind. Number one, how have I given this employee a notion of what the job is and what I expect? So at some point or another in the very beginning of whatever cycle you create, if you want to create a yearly cycle, you really need to do performance planning. And performance planning, you don't need all these computer systems necessarily to sort of reminders and SMART goals and things. There's lots of information you can get on the internet about performance planning. But the bottom line is, have you had a discussion with your employees individually, one-on-one, that basically says, okay, here's what I expect of you this year. And you put it into writing. And it should be specific and measurable and actionable and timed. If you expect someone to finish a major project or to get up to speed in 3 months on the basic technical requirements of the job, then put it in the performance plan. That's what starts the performance planning process. The second thing, as Carrie mentioned, is ongoing feedback. It isn't once every 6 months. There's some people in the old days, people used to say, do the performance planning in the middle, do the performance feedback every 6 months, do it quarterly. The question is, can I give objective, motivating, and thoughtful feedback on an ongoing basis? You can have a check-in every 6 months. That's a more formal one. You can do it every 3 months. But the objective is really what we've been talking about, which is motivating and thoughtful feedback. And then at the end of the year, it is important to sum up, or at the end of the cycle, to give an annual review an annual review in which you sort of say, this is what I've seen in the last year. And ask, there's a little, it should include an opportunity for the employee to sign the review. The employee doesn't necessarily, the wordings would say something to the effect that I've read this review. I don't necessarily agree with everything, or I do agree with everything, but in any case, I have seen this review and discussed it with my supervisor. That's very important, because people at the end of the cycle often feel like they've not been given a chance. And you'd be surprised at how many companies say things like, oh, John, you know how you've done this year. I don't want to sit down and do this. Just sign here. That's a recipe for real problems.
So I want to add a little bit to that about the performance management process, because the ongoing conversation should be two-way. It shouldn't be simply the company setting the goals. That should be a piece of it. But part of it is the manager saying, what are your goals for this year for yourself? Where do you see your role going, or your career here going? So that as you meet with them on a regular basis throughout the year, you can tweak those goals, you can redirect what this person is doing if it makes sense. And you need to ask the question, are you getting from us the tools and support you need to get your job done? And one thing about the annual review at the end of the year, if it comes as a surprise, the performance review you've written, then you haven't done your job throughout the year, because the employee should know exactly how they've done at any point in time. And I would encourage you, if there's a performance issue, to address it as it happens, not a month later, not a week later. And if someone does a particularly good job, I would acknowledge it in real time. The whole point of managing performance is to do it real time, and to create a feedback-rich culture in your company, so that people say, hey, this company's invested in my future, and they're actually listening to me throughout the year.
Again, in the chat, are some of our comments about managing performance, are they helpful to you in terms of, because several people wrote in, that's one of the things you want to talk about. Is this helpful? I get a comment from Michael. Let's see here in the chat. How do you manage someone who does their job well, but doesn't contribute to the morale of the team and undermines you? Oh my goodness. That is something, as Carrie said, that you have to come to grips with fairly early on. Do not let the year go by with someone who doesn't contribute to the morale of the team and undermines you. Now, that means that in the beginning of the cycle, and when you start performance planning, when you're giving performance feedback, you've established that the morale of the team and the support for the organization is part of their job. Okay? If you don't do that, and many people won't do that, why? Because let's say you have a really great technical performer, a really extremely productive employee. But in the end, that undermines things. I worked for a large consulting firm for many years. We would occasionally have an employee who was a great salesperson and a great consultant, but who would talk negatively about the firm, about employees, and violate things. And, even in a really good firm, we would sometimes let that go by, and then all of a sudden it would become a very bigger problem. Okay? So my advice is, how you manage that is, from the very beginning, you include as part of the job description, as Carrie mentioned, that morale of the team, that teamwork is an essential behavior, that constructive feedback is very different than undermining people.
And
What
there
about,
are, sorry.
yeah, go ahead, Carrie.
I was going to say that you know, that can be,
Question though.
um, having someone who undermines morale, you have to make the decision, is that something you can't tolerate within the company, that you've talked to them, you've set the expectations, you've given them a time frame to do this. There are times when you're going to have to say that the performance that they deliver from a technical perspective does not override the fact that they're fostering an environment that is not collaborative, that makes people feel bad, and you might have to decide to put them on a PIP, a performance improvement plan, make that the focus, and give them a time frame to turn it around. And sometimes you have to consider termination if it's really affecting the company adversely.
And that's what is part of, we can't cover all the subjects today. What we want to emphasize, as Teresa mentioned before, that we're consultants that work with, we're mentors and counselors who work with SCORE. And if there's a question today that comes up, like Carrie just mentioned the issue of a performance improvement plan. We really can't cover that in detail today. But if you have an issue like that and you want to talk about that, just get in touch with SCORE in Boston, and we're always glad to expand on some of the ideas that we're introducing today. Carrie, I want you to talk about an employee handbook and why that's, how that's really related and what's required from that.
So let's talk about, I'm going to make the assumption, possibly erroneously, that all of you are Massachusetts-based companies. If you're not, the same would hold true wherever your company is based or wherever you have employees. So there are federal laws you have to comply with. There are 8 federal laws that you must comply with, and all you have to do is look them up. I'm not going to go into them today because each one could take time to walk through. Massachusetts has 15 required laws you must comply with. Massachusetts does not require a company to have a handbook. It does, however, require companies to comply with all federal and Massachusetts laws. If you have employees in multiple states, you need to have laws that are reflective of their requirements as well. So my advice with an employee handbook, and I'm more than happy if anybody wants to come back and set up time to go through employee handbooks and compliance laws, to sit and do that, because they are a sticky wicket, is the only way I can describe them. They change frequently, and you need to keep up to date on how the laws are changing, because ignorance of the law does not protect you from a lawsuit. And these lawsuits are very onerous to the employer. So you want to make sure that you are on top of the labor laws, that it's incumbent on you as the employer. If you change a policy, if you update a policy, you have to let the employees know, and you have to have them sign off. So you should always, whether you use policies or whether you have a handbook, you must have the employees sign and date that they have read that handbook. And a good practice would be to have them initial and date every page, so they can't come back and say that page wasn't in the handbook that I read.
You know, again, we can't cover everything about handbooks today, but one thing to remember is that even if you're beginning, you don't have a handbook, one of the things you can do is just Google employee handbooks, and you can look at samples of them, and then you can talk with us and you can think about that. The basic thing is to think about what policies do you want to have in a handbook.
Well, it's also what policies are you required by law to
What
have.
policies you are required to. But for example, if you were running a home health care company and people were going in to see individual patients and clients, you would want to have a fairly clear dress code about approaching those folks. And one of the things that's interesting is that now if you listen to FM radio, you'll hear about these so-called HR companies that can answer all your questions. Then they cost like $99 a month to answer all your questions. And they include questions, and they say this on the radio, like, what if an employee comes poorly dressed to a client situation? You should already have thought about those kinds of things if that's an issue with you. And again, going back to one of the comments that Ted had, when it comes to performance, is it good to have your employees go through schooling within your company if they don't have the proper certification to build a stronger relationship with your employee? Absolutely. Whatever you can do to build a stronger relationship is important. That's why, as part of your talent plan, you should be thinking very hard about what kind of training does this person need to do to get up to speed. The last thing you want to have, by the way, as a surprise, is when you're about 6 months in, you say, well, you know, you really don't have the training to do this work, and we don't have the time to train you. I've seen that happen more than once. And it's not, you know, it's the kind of practice that you have to avoid.
And training and development is a retention tool. When employees are surveyed across the country, that's one of the most important things because it demonstrates investment in their career growth by the company. And it's now a key part of total rewards. We used to talk about compensation and benefits, and now we talk about total rewards. So you have compensation, you have benefits, you have training and development. And those are things you really should think about.
Now,
is
Yelena also asked, what do you think of the firms who handle this for small businesses like Gusto or like Bambi to handle issues like the employee handbook and compliance? Again, this is, you know, if you want to spend $99 a month or whatever they're going to charge you for that, that's okay. But I think the basic thing that we're saying is, if you're going to have an employee handbook, you should know the employee handbook. And we work with you. It isn't impossible. There are lots of samples of the employee handbook. There's lots of ways to figure out what's required, so that, you know, if you're already working with them, that's fine. But we're just saying right now, this can help you to sort of move forward. Let's go to the next slide if we could.
But
Carrie?
I would like to just say one thing about companies like Gusto is laws change frequently. Many heads of HR, when we updated our handbooks or our policies, we ran them by our employment attorneys because some of them are pretty difficult to stay on top of and time consuming. So the benefit to Augusto is that they stay on top of the laws by all 50 states. And so you have to decide, is it a trade-off? How many employees do I have? Do I really need this? Or is it a little premature in the life cycle of the company?
That's right. So if we go to slide 5.
Oh, sorry. I thought I did.
We've been talking about, when we have a little bit of a time limitation today, so we're going to go through this. There are always hiring issues and requirements day one. Worker classification. One of the worst things that we see all the time is this issue of employee versus independent contractor. And in Massachusetts, there's a 3-part test for determining whether you are an employee or an independent contractor. Just Google that. It's in very simple language if you haven't already, if you're a Massachusetts company in particular. And make sure that you abide by those things. There are rules around exempt and non-exempt. Again, most of this information is widely available. Just Google it. And if you have particular questions, come to see us, and we're always here. Compliance with federal and state laws. Remember that there are different laws for states and for the federal government. Remember that there are things that very often you do have a situation where even if you think it's a seasonal employee, like for a landscaping company, if that person is under the direct supervision of someone, even if they only work there for 4 months or 3 months, you're going to have to provide workers' comp. You're going to have to provide other kinds of things that are required. In some cases, they're not required. They're discretionary. And importantly, even if you have a handbook, make sure you've thought through the policies you want to have for discipline, for termination, for confidentiality, all those kinds of things. And in some cases, you can't necessarily have policies that prevent things like poaching. So know what you can and can't have.
I would also just add to what Steve is saying is do not just look at Massachusetts laws. You need to look at federal laws because, for example, with employee or independent contractor, you can be, the federal government typically does a baseline and the states will add to that. But you can be taken to court on both. So you need to know both sets of laws and make sure you're compliant with both.
There was one person who had a landscaping company on this call, and I remember having a client who had a landscaping client, a landscaping company, and hired seasonally, and thought that, well, they're kind of independent contractors. I don't want to go through all the benefit stuff. And sure enough, someone was badly injured with a lawnmower. And that, and there was no workers' compensation that was being given. And so all of a sudden that little company was in trouble for that kind of thing. Any other comments in the chat about legal issues that you want us to cover or that you have thoughts about? Okay. As someone said, we have workers' comp. We have experience in, and there's just lots of different things. Where can we find more information about these laws? Is a comment from somebody. Carrie, you want to talk
Right
to?
on the, all you have to do is Google if you're a Massachusetts company, you can Google Massachusetts employment laws. There is a ton of information on the mass.gov website. We also can help you to sort of go through and sort out what makes what's applicable to you. The federal government's website also has all the laws that you need to comply with federally. So most of this stuff is on there. You can certainly reach out to an insurance company to look at the kinds of workers' comp insurance, things like that, if you want much more detailed, because the state will go through what you need to have, but you can talk to somebody in the space. They'll help you to see what you need for a company your size and in your business.
So let's go to slide 6, unless there are more comments on this particular issue. Okay, so first of all, we want to talk a little bit about what people are experiencing. There are what we call paradoxes, two things going on at the same time. You need to give employees faith in the future, and you need to give them a reason to believe in your organization. And, at the same time, you are facing rising costs and wages. It means you've got to be more creative in the way that you deal with talent, and so that your employees can even be resilient and more committed to your business. During COVID in particular, we saw an increase in the number of customer behaviors that were negative. People were hostile to people who were waiters and waitresses and things like that. And you need motivated employees at this time when there is a lot of tension. People walk into a restaurant, for example, as a good example, because we have a lot of clients, and they all of a sudden are talking about how expensive everything is, and they're irritated. So you need a motivated employee. And the question is, do you consider your company to be a talent magnet? Okay. And I guess I'd like to hear from some people in the chat. Do you walk the talk? How are you dealing with issues of uncertainty? Anybody who want to comment on that? Let's see. Do you walk the talk? Okay. Anybody wants to comment on that? Is your company a talent magnet? Do people want to come to work for you? Okay. Well, it's a concept to think about. We may not have any, comments on this right now, but it's something we want you to think about. A payroll system obviously is something for tracking data, but you don't have to delegate management to the system as we've previously been talking about. Someone asked on the previous section, did you mention that non-compete agreements are no longer allowed? Non-compete, that is true, and yet people still will say, we have a non-compete. Okay. So anybody who thinks their company is a talent magnet? Okay. Eli says, we're very transparent with our customers, so usually no negative surprises. We are not a talent magnet yet, but we're working on becoming one. An example of a talent magnet in our industry would be gentle giant movers. There are people, again, this is what Eli is saying, or Ellie, I don't know what his is saying, that there is a trucking company that knows how to be a talent magnet. And when you see a company like that, there's no reason why you can't, copy their procedures. Alan says, I have no employees yet, but people keep asking me to bring them on. I think I am a talent management, but I have no idea how to handle that. Okay, yeah, there's lots of different comments in that sense. So I haven't become currently not operating yet. People have said, so you don't know. But as you think about hiring people, as Alan said, you do want to think about, okay, how can I attract people? What can I do? And the most important thing is to walk the talk. That if you're going to, there's a woman who started out with one restaurant in Roxbury. Her name's Nia Grace. She had Daryl's Kitchen. And what I used to go there every once in a while. And what you would see is that everybody greeted you. That was her style. And she would greet you when you came in. And I remember being there one day and, something had dropped on the floor, like a piece of food had dropped on the floor. And the first person who was picking up the piece of food on the floor, and she didn't have to do it, she was the owner of the restaurant, was Nia. She's now got a couple of restaurants, including a well-known place on the seaport. So, those are the kinds of people you want to model yourself after. So let's go to slide 7, if we could. We want to talk about you for a second. So some of you have employees, some of you don't yet. The most important thing to remember, and we're sort of talking about managing talent, is not just the workers, but managing yourself. Because you're the scarcest resource in the company. And you've got to take care of yourself. So what do you need to be effective at managing yourself? You need checklists. You need counselors. Sometimes you need a canary. What's a canary? It's a person, it comes from the phrase canary in the coal mine. If you've got 3 or 4 employees, who is the one who gives you feedback? Who tells you, hey, Joe, hey, Steve, things are not going exactly right. You need canaries sometimes. You need to be very systematic in the way you approach things. You need to be a counselor sometimes. So you've got to also remember this word paradox, stay strong without losing the way in your connection to your workforce and your customers. So you've got the burden of the financials, you've got the burden of customer relationships, but you at the same time have to stay strong and confident. You got to walk in your employees' shoes and still forge ahead. I recently talked to somebody who's working in a hospital, and she said, my coworker is just impossible to work with. I go to my boss is incredibly sympathetic, but doesn't do anything. So I don't need her sympathy. I need her to do something. How can you be a leader who always does something? Right now, there's this issue that we're trying to revitalize. You're always trying to revitalize your company. You're always trying to breathe new life into an organization. And yet employees can get sort of change weary. They're like, okay, I understand you want to revitalize. It's almost like a sports team. How do I keep them energized and at the same time not become too much of just a cheerleader? It means that you've got to, more than ever, listen and stay humble. And interestingly enough, as a leader, you also have to be a counselor. That's what the essence of counseling is. It's listening and staying humble. Why? Because your customers and employees may have the answer. Now, I'd like to hear from somebody who's out there. How stressed are you feeling from some people? What are your thoughts? Is it hard to manage yourself? Let's see. Somebody is saying something. Any thoughts? Do you consider yourself a scarce resource? Okay. So Mike has said, yes, sometimes I have trouble taking over. Doesn't seem like there are enough hours in the day, that's for sure. That's the experience of the scarcity of resource. You as a resource, you've got to make sure that you're thinking about those things. Yes, I'm trying to be an owner, HR, and PR person, says Robin. Yep, there are lots of different hats you roll, and that's why the checklist is so important, making sure that as you go through your day, you're thinking about each of your roles and what you can do, as opposed to thinking about it at the last minute. It's a marvelous book by a very famous neurosurgeon named Atul Gawande, who was the chair of neurosurgery at Brigham Women's. And he talks about how when he tried to get doctors, very famous neurosurgeons, 16 years of training, to keep a checklist of what needed to be done every year, people said, we don't want to do that. That's silly. It's elementary. We're brilliant neurosurgeons. And he found that a lot of stuff in his department was not getting done. Not only that, sometimes in an operation, it wasn't getting done, or in cleaning up the operating room. So yes, there are these issues of trying to do too much. So checklists can help you, but thinking of yourself as a resource, recognizing that you can't do everything every day, you've got to be systematic in the way you approach things. Okay, so let's go to the next slide if we could, Carrie. Okay. The deal. We mentioned this in the very beginning. It's all the more important in these difficult times. The deal is changing all the time. The deal changed as a result of COVID. What was the biggest thing that changed as a result of COVID? At least in a lot of companies, people learned that they liked remote work. Some companies can offer remote work. You have a landscaping company, you can't offer remote work, but some companies can. So the question always is, when you're thinking about total rewards, what do I give? What do I get? Salaries have been going up, but now people are much more conscious about it. Sometimes they leave for salaries. Benefits have been cut back and their cost has gone up. So yet, with inflation, and in fact, the facts on inflation are pretty complicated, but employees feel they have a right to ask for more because prices have gone up. And they see their purchasing power go down, especially if you're thinking about Gen Z employees. Those employees who are like 18 to 28, those employees right now are facing higher costs when they want to go out to restaurants and bars, higher rents. And so they are going to be very focused on salary,
So
even if their salaries are going up. Yes, Carrie.
I'd like to add that the Department of Labor also agrees that the salaries need to go up. You know, the Department of Labor sets a threshold for salary for who's entitled to overtime wages and who isn't. And typically, those who are entitled are non-exempt, and those who are not entitled, usually professional workers, are exempt. On July 1st, and this will be contested by a lot of companies, there'll be a lawsuit, but the annual threshold in July 1st is going from 35,568 to 43,888. So anyone who's making under that 43,000 is going to be eligible for overtime. On January 1st of next year, that's going to increase to 58,636. So anyone who's exempt will have to make over that 58,000. Anyone who's under is going to be eligible for overtime, assuming that the Department of Labor stands up, wins in court. And this is why it's so important to stay ahead and on top of all the compliance that's going on.
Now, in addition, as you think about things, people often ask us, how do you incentivize people without pay? Now, there are no magic bullets for that, but money is not often the deciding factor. I mean, we have enough research on that. The reason that people stay often, they don't go to work for a company because they get a good supervisor, but they will stay with a good supervisor. If they have a bad supervisor, or they don't feel that they have a supervisor, they will often, that is a principal reason that they leave. Let's go to the next slide, if we could, Carrie.
You might want to train your managers to stay on top of employee satisfaction, how to develop it.
Absolutely. Now, if we mentioned this notion of total rewards, and we're coming near the end of our seminar today, our webinar, stop thinking about, if there's one message we could leave you with and about the deal, think of your employees as having a deal. Think of you as having a deal with your employees. Think of total rewards, not just pay. Think of a job, that's part of the total rewards. The pay, the benefits, the working conditions, the training that you're going to give them. Some of you mentioned giving more training. Whether it's a supportive and flexible work environment. Do you know the birthdays of everybody who works for you? Do you know what they need? If they have a family problem one day, or one of their kids is sick, can you afford to let them sort of go away? One of the biggest things is there a chance to really grow with this company? Younger people especially want to know, is there a career opportunity here? Am I just doing a job? Because if I'm just doing a job and somebody offers me a chance to really grow with a company, to become a manager, to become a supervisor, to become senior at something, that's going to be very attractive. All of this is important to think about when you think about convincing a prospective employee about the value of your package. Always refer to it as a package and its relevance to them. Think about how you can be, when it comes to total rewards, innovative, different. Offer them some other thing that's important. If they're young and they really like, company celebrations, do some company celebrations. If they're not into that and they just would like to have, something like a T-Pass so they don't have to always worry about it, during the course of the year and coming up with it, offer that. So think about the ways that you can compensate with money and without money. Giving somebody a day off, just making sure that you come across as having a flexible work environment. Not everybody can, sometimes hours are fixed, sometimes hours are not fixed. So think about how to do that sort of thing. And lastly, if we could go to the next page, the last page. We've been talking about, we wish we could spend more time with you today. We've been talking about effective talent management, and it really means staying close to your employees. In the last several years, and all of us have a natural tendency to shy away from sometimes conflict, especially if the employee is not performing at a high level, especially in times of high stress. But you've got to be the person who walks in their shoes, not a person who feels sorry for them. That's the difference between empathy and sympathy. You've got to also think about how to help them get through whatever the situations or crises you're facing in your business. I've never worked for anybody where there wasn't some situation or crisis that stressed us. And the leadership, the difference between great leadership and mediocre leadership was the people who understood what was going on and tried to help us. Most of all, be a leader you can be trusted with the good news and the bad news. You need to be transparent about the state of the company. And that's sort of hard for employees. And for entrepreneurs, and you're all entrepreneurs, if you go to the last slide, if you could, Carrie. Be the leader your employees and customers need. You're the brand and the promise. All of what we've been talking about in terms of human resources is a discipline. And hope is also a discipline, because even though we've been talking about legal issues, remember, you're the role model for your employees. You can't show panic or depression. You can't pretend that everything's the same. You can't react when the cost of goods go up. Oh my God, the cost of goods went up this much. I talked to somebody who runs a company with 200 employees the other day. And all he did was complain about the cost of goods of going up. I said, what's going on with your employees? Oh, they're all angry about things. He's kind of lost control of his own emotions. There is uncertainty out there, and it's not a reflection of only the economy, but it's here to stay. But you can, this is why we work with small businesses. We feel you can chart a course for growth. And if you chart a course for growth, it means offering opportunity for employees. So we wish you all the best of luck in this process. We know it's not simple, but we think that there is a course that you can chart. We're here to help you in whatever ways we can to grow your business and to think about opportunities for employees. Any last thoughts, Carrie?
No, I think, Steve, we've covered most of the stuff. I would like to reiterate, we're here if you need much more detailed information on whether it's labor laws, whether it's annual review process, how to retain your employees. That's a good time to think about getting a mentor to walk you through some of the strategies for all of that.
So thank you very much. Thank you for being here today.
Hey, Steve, can you mention the name of that book that you talked about, the neurosurgeon? Can you get that author?
Yeah, I'll get the actual title. It's Atul Gawande. I'll get the actual title because I'm forgetting it now. But it's the effective checklist.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much for everybody participating, and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve and Carrie. Bye, everybody.